O eternal and almighty God, from whom all power and wisdom come, we are assembled here before thee to frame such laws as may tend to the welfare and prosperity of our province. Grant, O merciful God, we pray thee, that we may desire only that which is in accordance with thy will, that we may seek it with wisdom and know it with certainty and accomplish it perfectly, for the glory and honor of thy name and for the welfare of all our people. Amen. We acknowledge we are gathered on Treaty 1 territory and that Manitoba is located on the treaty territories and ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, Anishinaabe, Dakota Awate, Dene Sulene, and Nihithowag nations. We acknowledge Manitoba is located on the homeland of the Red River Métis. We acknowledge northern Manitoba includes lands that were and are the ancestral lands of the Inuit. We respect the spirit and intent of treaties and treaty making and remain committed to working in partnership with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people in the spirit of truth, reconciliation, and collaboration. Good afternoon, everybody. Please be seated. Routine proceedings, introduction of bills. The Honourable Member for Union Station.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move, seconded by the MLA for Wolseley, that Bill number 232, the Health Services Insurance Amendment Act, Administrative Penalties for Personal Care Homes, be now read a first time.
It has been moved by the Honourable Member for Union Station, seconded by the Honourable Member for Wolseley, that Bill number 232, the Health Services Insurance Amendment Act, Administrative Penalties for Personal Care Homes, be now read a first time. The Honourable Member for Union Station.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am pleased to introduce Bill 232, the Health Services Insurance Amendment Act, Administrative Penalties for Personal Care Homes. The COVID-19 pandemic highlighted failures in Manitoba's personal care homes, which resulted in the government commissioning the Stevenson Report. Unfortunately, we continue to hear stories of maltreatment, chronic understaffing, and poor conditions for personal care home residents. Currently, operators face little to no consequences when they fail to provide adequate care. Bill 232 would change that. Bill 232 would allow inspectors to issue on-the-spot fines of up to $5,000 to personal care home operators if they find they're breaking the rules or failing to uphold specific standards of care. I look forward to the unanimous support for Bill 232 in this House. Thank you.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Agreed? Agreed, and so ordered. Committee reports, tabling of reports. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wish to table written responses to questions number 9 that appeared in our order paper posed by the member for River Heights and fall within the Department of Health.
Ministerial statements. Member statements. Minister of Environment and Climate.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Domestic violence is a widespread issue that affects individuals, families, and communities around the globe. It is a type of abuse that is often in a relationship where one partner tries to control and dominate the other. It can be physical, emotional, verbal, sexual, or financial. Unfortunately, domestic violence does not make the news too often. We don't talk about it, although it is one of the highest calls for service for police services across our country and right here in Manitoba. Victims are often too afraid, ashamed to speak out, which often could lead to a fatal ending. In 2020, 160 women and girls were killed by violence in Canada. In 2021, 173 women and girls were killed by violence in Canada. In 2022, 184 women and girls were killed by violence. That's an average of 9 women and girls killed each week in our country. 51% of women and more than 1 million children are affected yearly by domestic violence, regardless of their financial status, ethnicity, or education. Madam Speaker, I chose to speak today to recognize my mom. My mom, Joanne, who had just graduated becoming a nurse, would be celebrating her birthday today. But sadly, she was murdered by her spouse. And we all became a victim of domestic violence. Domestic violence affects not only the victims, but it also affects their children and families. For example, children of all ages who witness domestic violence in their home are more likely to suffer from behavioral or emotional problems such as anxiety, PTSD, and depression. And I'm no longer embarrassed, I was for many years, to say that I deal with my own on a regular basis. We must stop domestic violence, and we can by raising awareness, providing support and resources to victims, and holding abusers fully and financially accountable.
The member's time has expired. Is there a leave to allow the member to complete his statement? Leave has been granted. The Honourable Minister of Environment and Climate.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and to my colleagues. We must end domestic violence, and we can by raising awareness, providing support and resources to victims, and as I said previously, holding abusers fully and financially accountable. Creating safe spaces where victims with their children can seek help without fear of judgment or retaliation is critical. In addition, educating the public about domestic violence and its effects on the community is essential. Most importantly, to teach others how to recognize the signs of domestic violence and how to let victims know they're not alone. I stand here today, decades after, and I love my mom more than I ever have, and I think of her daily. And if me speaking about our tragedy ends or helps one woman or child get out of their situation, I know my mom would be proud. Colleagues, please help me break the silence. It's time to speak out and take action to end domestic violence for good in our country.
The Honourable Member for Union Station.
People experiencing addictions need our support. They are deserving of a compassionate and evidence-rooted approach to healthcare. Instead, the PC government is failing these Manitobans and their families. They have refused to support supervised consumption sites, a measure that we know would save lives. They have failed to be transparent on overdose deaths in our province by refusing to release the numbers in a timely manner. And now, instead of implementing measures that will save lives and help Manitobans experiencing addictions, this government has introduced Bill 333, which does nothing but create more barriers for people receiving life-saving care. The PC government has made it clear that they don't care about working with people and organizations who are already doing the important work of harm reduction in communities. These people who have stepped up to provide life-saving frontline care where the PC government has failed to, and yet this government didn't even bother to consult with them on Bill 33. The Manitoba Harm Reduction Network said they were blindsided by the bill and that it will increase harm rather than decrease it. Sunshine House's mobile overdose prevention site has seen over 4,500 visits in the last 4 months alone. They said that they were sideswiped by the announcement of Bill 33, were not consulted on it, and that this government has been unresponsive to the fact that record numbers of Manitobans are dying of overdoses. Harm reduction groups in our province are in agreement that Bill 33 closes the door to supervised consumption sites and puts up barriers to addictions care. The government should do the right thing and admit that Bill 33 was the wrong approach and rescind it. To those Manitobans who are struggling with addictions right now, you deserve a government who doesn't perpetuate stigma and deny you life-saving care if you don't conform to their ideology. On our NDP team, on this side of the House, we see you, we hear you, we support you, and we want you to know that you are not alone.
The Honourable Member for Brandon West.
Madam Speaker, Friday, April 7th is Green Shirt Day.
Order.
A day to bring attention to organ and tissue donation for transplants. It is also a day to honor Logan Boulet and the Logan Boulet effect. Logan Boulay was one of the Humboldt Broncos killed in the tragic bus crash on April 6th, 5 years ago. 5 years ago, Madam Speaker. The summer before, Logan had decided to sign up to be an organ and tissue donor. Madam Speaker, we've all seen evidence of the Logan Boulay effect. The number of people signing up to be an organ and tissue donor skyrocketed after they learned of Logan's selfless act. I believe Canadians were all looking for some positive impact from the tragic crash. We found it in Logan's impact on organ and tissue donation. It certainly had an impact in Manitoba. Madam Speaker, as I said, April 7th is Green Shirt Day. It's a day dedicated to promoting organ donation awareness while honoring the Logan Boulay effect. I'm wearing my green shirt. I encourage all of my colleagues and all Manitobans to consider organ and tissue donation. Please go to signupforlife.ca and become a donor. You need your health card, the health card number, and please remember to discuss your wishes with your family and your loved ones, as they will be asked what you intended. The Boulay family continues to honor Logan's memory and bring attention to the critical importance of signing up to be an organ and tissue donor. Last year, his parents, Bernadine and Tony, were honored in Winnipeg and were given the key to the city in addition to speaking at a Jets game about Logan's decision. This year, the Winnipeg sign and the Esplanade Riel will be lit green in honor of organ and tissue donation. Logan's decision changed the lives of 6 people and influenced many more. We all have the ability to follow Logan's example. Please become part of the Logan Boulay effect at signupforlife.ca.
The Honourable Member for St. John's.
Linda Mary Beardy, age 33, a mother to 4 beautiful children, a daughter, a cousin, a friend. From everything that I've seen and read over the last 24 hours, Linda would give you the clothes off her back and would fiercely protect those in her sacred circle. Yesterday, we learned the devastating news of Linda's death and of the discovery of her body in a landfill. There is no greater illustration of how little Indigenous women are thought of than this, and of December's news of the murders of Rebecca Contois, Morgan Harris, Mercedes Moran, and Buffalo Woman, who were met with similar circumstances. And while there are many who would pervasively shift blame directly onto the victims, make no mistake, the epidemic of MMIWG2S is predicated upon colonial Canada. The project that is colonial Canada was and continues to be waged on the bodies of Indigenous women and girls. And so no sooner had the news come out yesterday than did the same old racist, anti-Indigenous rhetoric from shameless trolls start. Indigenous women suffer so much, and instead of compassion and mobilization, all we get is more hate. I don't use that word lightly. Indigenous women are hated. So much so that we are vilified, even in death. We need action that demonstrates Indigenous women are valued and protected. So how are we protecting societal and economic and health and education and housing and family and spiritual protections for Indigenous women? This requires political will and sustained and deep financial commitment. For now, the genocide of Indigenous women continues, and as we mourn, we as Indigenous women continue to support one another. And so to all of my beautiful sisters and relatives, you are sacred, you are powerful, you are courageous, you are generous, you are brave, you are fierce, you are divine, you are protectors, you are fighters, you are fearless, you are matriarchs, and you are absolutely loved. May God shine.
The Honourable Member for Midland.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The $50 million Arts, Culture and Sport and Community Fund, ACSC, projects were announced on March 17th. Midland constituency received over $597,000 for 6 projects in this announcement. The South Central Library in Miami received $12,000 for library renovations. Golden Prairie Arts received $12,000 for upper-level renovations to the former CN rail station in Carman. Ski Birch near Roselle received $60,000 for 2 projects to enhance the cross-country ski experience of participants. The Boyne Regional Library in Carman will receive $25,000 to develop Discover and Go passes for their expanding membership. Under the $475,000 large capital program grant, the Carman Dufferin Arena ice plant installed in 1972 will be replaced with an energy-efficient modern ice plant. There were several more projects submitted needing some modifications, and these will be resubmitted for the April 17th deadline for another round of funding. The ACSC funding program received over $200 million in applications, proving the need is there. These projects enhance the arts, culture, and sport opportunities in our communities, making them more attractive to work, play, and live. Our government realizes how vital these projects are for our communities, and this is why the Department of Sport, Culture, and Heritage is working hard to approve another $50 million in grants this spring. Thank you to all those organizations who volunteer their time and energy to enhance the quality of life in their respective communities. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Prior to oral questions, I would like to draw the attention of all honorable members to the public gallery, where we have with us today from the Paw, Manitoba, Mayor Andre Murphy, Councillor Carrie Atkinson, Councillor Trent Allen, Chief Administrative Officer Jennifer Early, and Saman Mirza Agha, who are the guests of the honorable member for the Paw, Cami Sack. On behalf of all honorable members, we welcome all of you to the Manitoba Legislature. Oral questions. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
The Premier makes announcements about health care but doesn't follow through. In April of 2002, the Premier said a new operating room at the Concordia Hospital would be up and running by December of last year. And the Premier's Health Minister said the operating room is expected to be in place by the end of the year, referring to the end of 2022. Also, I'll table the government's own press release where these remarks were stated. Of course, we shouldn't be surprised, the deadline was missed. Then the Premier decided to revisit, say that the OR would be ready at the end of March, which was, of course, last week. Can the Premier tell the House if the new orthopedic operating room is in place at the Concordia Hospital?
The Honourable First Minister.
Very much, Madam Speaker. I believe the Leader of the Opposition mentioned something about 2002. I don't believe I was the Premier in 2002. Right. Perhaps he's referring to something else, Madam Speaker. But what I will say is the Leader of the Opposition continues to put false information on the record in this chamber. He knows full well that we are investing almost $8 billion, right. Historic help for our healthcare system. Madam Speaker, that's $668 million more than last year, a 9.2% increase to our healthcare system just over last year. Madam Speaker, we recognize there's more work to do, and we're committed to getting that done.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a supplementary question.
I just want to point out for you, Madam Speaker, that when I tabled a government press release, the Premier said I was putting false information on the record. Now, the reason why that statement is true is because there was an announcement that the OR would be in place at the end of 2022. Order. That deadline was missed. Of course, the Health Minister and the Premier broke their word in that instance. The Premier went on to say it would be ready at the end of March. That was last week. I'll cut to the chase. There is no operating room ready at the Concordia Hospital, Madam Speaker. It's just another example of an announcement and of a promise broken by this Premier, just like Brian Pallister. Why did the Premier not tell Manitobans that there would be no new operating room at the Concordia Hospital this March?
The Honourable First Minister.
Well, Madam Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition should note that this is something that his party was not in favour of, Madam Speaker. Let's remind the Leader of the Opposition that when this is up and running, Madam Speaker, more than 1,000 surgical procedures will take place. And I will remind the Leader of the Opposition that each and every one of the members opposite voted against it. Voted against that, Madam Speaker.
Shame.
We will take no lessons from the members opposite.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a final supplementary.
No one believes this government when it comes to health care. And the reason why nobody believes this government when it comes to health care is because, just like Bryant Pallister, they make announcements and then there is no follow-through, no action. Already multiple deadlines missed when it comes to the operating room at Concordia Hospital. And the impact on patients is this. There are many thousands of Manitobans waiting to get those surgeries, and they continue to wait on those waiting lists because of the inaction and the mismanagement of this PC government. Will the Premier tell the House why her government has broken its promise on the new operating room at the Concordia Hospital?
The Honourable First Minister.
Speaker, I'll remind the Leader of the Opposition that we invested over $110 million last year, and in this budget this year, $130 million towards surgical and diagnostic task force procedures, Madam Speaker. And I will remind the Leader of the Opposition that he and every one of his colleagues on that side of the House voted against it, Madam Speaker. Now, we know that Manitobans want their surgical procedures sooner, Madam Speaker, and closer to home. That's why our Surgical and Diagnostic Task Force has been ensuring that we are contracting out those services so that Manitobans can get those services as quickly as they can, Madam Speaker. That's why we have contracted out some of those services, Madam Speaker, so that those Manitobans don't have to wait in pain. They can go get their hip and knee surgery now, Madam Speaker. And I will remind the Leader of the Opposition once again, and all Manitobans, what did they do, Madam Speaker? They voted against it.
Shame.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a new question.
You know, Madam Speaker, the question was about when the Concordia operating room is going to get built, and this Premier has missed 2 deadlines already, and now apparently there's not even a timeline for the OR to be open. I'll switch now to a question about rural health care, because we're the only team in this chamber that stands up for rural health care in Manitoba. These Tory MLAs need to get outside the perimeter. Well, they'll find that in Riverton, Manitobans are waiting over an hour for an ambulance. That's what FIPA documents show that I'll table now. In Grandview, people are waiting 45 minutes or longer for EMS to arrive. It's 50 minutes in Melita. This is very concerning. Will the Premier tell the House why EMS wait times are so bad across rural Manitoba?
Order. The Honourable First Minister.
Well, Madam Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition again continues to put false information on the record, and for him to pretend to stand up for people in rural communities, let me remind those folks, those great folks right across rural Manitoba, Madam Speaker, what did the NDP do when they were in government at that time to communities right across rural Manitoba? They closed, Madam Speaker, and you'll recall this, they closed more than 16, almost 20 rural emergency rooms right across Manitoba, Madam Speaker.
Shame.
We will take no lessons from the members opposite.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a supplementary question.
You know, Madam Speaker, I would encourage the Premier to reconsider her position and to start paying attention to this issue. Anyone who spends time in rural Manitoba will know that EMS waits are a very serious topic and a hot topic of discussion. Now, the documents that we showed put it into vivid detail the amount of time that people are waiting for ambulances to arrive in rural Manitoba. I asked for the Premier to explain the cause of this. We know the cause. Allied healthcare professionals have been without a contract, including these paramedics, have been without a contract for 5 years under both Brian Pallister and under this Premier. That's a 5-year wage freeze. No wonder we're having trouble with staffing in rural healthcare centers. Why is the Premier refusing to treat EMS workers fairly?
The Honourable First Minister.
Well, Madam Speaker, I appreciate the Leader of the Opposition bringing up a question regarding ambulances, Madam Speaker. It gives me an opportunity to remind Manitobans that under the NDP, people who had to get ambulatory services were having to pay 100% more than they are right now, Madam Speaker. Double the cost to get an ambulance to those folks, Madam Speaker. We cut those ambulance fees in half to make ambulances more accessible for all Manitobans.
Hey.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a final supplementary.
Everyone in rural Manitoba knows that EMS wait times are a major issue. And yet, so many rural MLAs have been conspicuously silent on this issue. They're not raising the concerns of people in their communities, communities like Melita and Grandview, communities like Erickson, where we see these wait times stretch on and on and on. We know that the issue has a political cause. This Premier refuses to enter into a contract with the allied healthcare professionals, including the EMS workers in these very regions. They freeze the wages, and now people in rural Manitoba wait longer and longer and longer. It's one thing for the Premier to disrespect these EMS workers, but why is she ignoring the priority of rural Manitobans?
The Honourable First Minister.
Madam Speaker, I want to thank all of those EMS workers who do incredible work right across this province of ours, Madam Speaker. And if the Leader of the Opposition, we certainly have a tremendous amount of respect for those employees, Madam Speaker. So much respect that we want to let the collective bargaining process move forward in the appropriate manner. Now, the Leader of the Opposition seems to be suggesting that he wants to interfere in that process. Well, I would say that would be disrespectful to those individuals who are working very hard in our EMS services, Madam Speaker. We will allow that collective bargaining process to take place. It's the right thing to do, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for St. John's.
Yesterday, we learned the devastating news that the body of an Indigenous woman and mother, Linda Mary Beardy, was found in the Brady landfill. On behalf of our team, our sincerest condolences to the family of Miss Beardy and to the community of Lake St. Martin. Linda is loved and is cherished, and yet she was disposed of in a landfill. It's clear that more needs to be done to protect Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirited. Can the Premier explain to the House and to MMIWG families and to Indigenous women and girls what action she's taking to protect us from violence?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
I would echo the condolences that were offered by the official opposition House Leader. I know our Premier expressed those condolences yesterday in the House. I did outside of the House, and I know that many other members did as well. Every one of these tragedies reminds us that there is more that needs to be done. Every one of these tragedies reminds us that there is a grieving family, friends that are left behind, that mourn the loss of an individual, both in the fact that they were lost, but also in the way that they were lost and the way that they were found, Madam Speaker. So I'm happy to speak about some initiatives that are happening, but I do want to express on behalf of all members that we share in the condolences that were expressed by the official opposition House Leader.
The Honourable Member for St. John's on a supplementary question.
Yesterday, Miss Beardy's body was found in the Brady landfill. She was a mother, and she was cherished by her children and her family and her community. Her life was sacred, and I'm furious. And every single person in this chamber and every single person in Manitoba should be furious at the continual epidemic levels of violence against Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirited. And so it is clear that there's not enough being done to protect us. And so again, I ask the Premier to tell us what action she's going to take to protect Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirited.
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Well, the member will know that in my role as the Attorney General, I can't speak about any specific ongoing investigation in this particular case. In general, I can say that this government, led by this Premier, has supported a number of initiatives, including one recently announced that included an integrated missing persons unit, one that didn't exist before, working together with the Winnipeg Police Service and the RCMP, because those who go missing, the thousands who are reported missing every year, the vast majority of them are women, the vast majority of them are young women, and the vast majority of those are young Indigenous women. And we need to ensure that there's an integrated effort to be able to proactively try to find those individuals before harm is brought to them.
The Honourable Member for St. John's on a final supplementary.
I want to make it explicitly clear that Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirited are not at fault for the violence that's perpetrated against our bodies, despite individuals, peoples that would like to put that blame onto us, that we somehow put ourselves at risk. It is society that puts Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirited at risk because of the gaps in services and the inaction that's taken really at every level. As members of this House, we have a sacred responsibility to act immediately to protect Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirited. This government needs to make this a priority, and so I would ask the Premier to tell us what the government is going to do immediately to protect Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirited.
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
I know that there is no member of this House that would suggest that it is Indigenous women who are at fault for this, Madam Speaker. I also have no doubt that there are individuals outside in society, some of whom might be engaging with the member on things like social media, who are, and they should be condemned, and rightfully condemned. This government has taken action on many things, including, as I described, an integrated missing persons unit that will be able to triage and will be able to look from the thousands of different reports that are coming of missing individuals, which ones are the most likely to be at risk, and so that police can dedicate those resources to ensuring that those who are most likely at risk can be found before they fall into harm.
The Honourable Member for Union Station.
Last week, our party was proud to stand with frontline service organizations providing life-saving supports for individuals with addictions and offer our support for the work that they're already doing by stopping Bill 33. This PC government has failed to consult and listen to these community organizations and medical experts, and instead of working with them in partnership, they tried to end their good work and tie it up in red tape and bureaucracy. My question is, now that Bill 33 will not pass, will the minister stop dragging her feet and start actually listening to experts who are saying that her PC government's approach is wrong?
The Honourable Minister of Mental Health and Community Wellness.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Monday was a very sad day for people in Manitoba. On Monday, Bill 33, a bill that offered safety for individuals seeking support services, offered safety for community, for family, was stopped. As a result, the safety, consistency, and accountability that we owe individuals seeking these addiction services was ended. No to Bill 33 means no to safety from the NDP.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Member for Union Station on a supplementary question.
Not just community organizations, but doctors are concerned about this PC government's approach to addictions. The minister recently received a letter from the iMaples group of doctors and other professionals, which is an interprofessional organization passionate about clinical care, advocacy, research, and education related to supporting people who use substances before, during, and after pregnancy. They say that they are concerned that the PC government, and I quote, will create additional barriers to organizations working with people who use substances and will negatively impact services provided, end quote. These organizations need a partner that will work with them, not shut them down. Will this minister do the right thing today and support life-saving care in Manitoba? And I will table that letter from those expert doctors.
Wow.
The Honourable Minister for Mental Health and Community Wellness.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Bill 33 was a bill that ensured continuum of care for individuals. It provided prevention, it provided treatment, and it provided a pathway to recovery. So individuals who are seeking the supports of medical were able to then ensure that they and their family members knew that they were safely being able to access services and ensure that they were able to then recover in a better manner.
The Honourable Member for Union Station on a final supplementary.
Madam Speaker, we know, unfortunately, that this PC government doesn't listen to Manitobans, and they certainly have not been listening to the expert healthcare providers and medical evidence. The doctors and other professionals state in their letter to the minister, and I quote, "We are in the midst of an addictions healthcare crisis with people dying as a result. Action is needed, and the most impactful action will be evidence-based and community-informed," end quote. Now that our team has stopped this minister's red tape, will she reverse course and take action today to support the current work of organizations saving lives every day in our province, including Sunshine House?
The Honourable Minister for Mental Health and Community Wellness.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Bill 33 offers individuals accessing services, treatment that offers services to individuals who are particularly vulnerable. And Bill 33 was offering them an opportunity to have a safe environment. Removing Bill 33 and not having standards and regulations in place also then means that individuals now have no requirements with which they set up these facilities. So this means then that anyone can open up a site. It could be in your neighborhood, it could be beside your school, it could be beside your child care facility. Where's the safety of all the community members and those accessing the services at this point? There is no.
Order. The Honourable Member for Kuwait-Nook.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I recently met with the pioneer fishers out of Gimli. They represent commercial fishers on Lake Winnipeg, and they're not happy with this PC government. They told me this government and this minister are not listening to their concerns. And this department is not working collaboratively with fishers. Can the minister explain why his government is not working collaboratively and not involving commercial fishers in decisions that are directly affecting our commercial fishing industry here in Manitoba?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Northern Development.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. Our government has consistently met with commercial fishers, and we certainly want to enhance the commercial fishing industry in Manitoba, and I'm prepared to meet with any commercial fishery that wants to meet with me. I've met with several now, and I'm always open to meetings. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Kuwait-Nook on a supplementary question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Perhaps he's not referring to the fishermen that were not allowed into the minister's office. Commercial fishers do not feel respected by this PC government. In 2019, this PC government changed mess size requirements, which directly affected the livelihood of our fishers here in Manitoba. Fishers were not adequately consulted or supported with this change, but rather had the change imposed by this government, and many lost thousands of dollars. This lack of collaboration continues as fishers say they're being harshly fined and targeted for minimal infractions, and that they're not able to work collaboratively with Manitoba Conservation. Can the minister explain how his government is going to repair the relationship with Manitoba's commercial fishers today?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Northern Development.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. The member on the opposite side continues to put false information on the record. My office is open to any commercial fisherman that wants to come and see me. Our PC government is making key investments to protect our valuable commercial fishing industry. It contributes $100 million to our economy every year. We've invested $600,000 in additional funding to enhance provincial fisheries field programs. We've lobbied the federal government to confirm Manitoba fisheries were included in the $469 million Canadian Seafood Stabilization Fund. We're taking action as a government, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Kiiwetinoong on a final supplementary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Commercial fishing is a key economic driver here in Manitoba, but being ignored by this government. Many Manitobans in the North and Interlake rely on fishing to feed and support their families. However, under this PC government, fourth and fifth generation fishers are finding it harder and harder to make ends meet. And at this rate, under this government, we will no longer have a viable commercial fishing industry. The minister talks about having respect for our commercial fishers, but his actions show anything but respect. Our fishers here in Manitoba feel as though the PC government is implementing a top-down approach without consultation and collaboration.
Shame.
Fishers feel that the minister is more worried about enforcement and punishment rather than working together. Can the minister commit to changing his approach and instead work with Manitoba's commercial fishers and not against, and will he do so today?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources and Northern Development.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. The NDP's policies were a disservice to the hardworking commercial fishers who rely on the lakes for their livelihood. The lack of investment in science-based management, research, and innovation led to habitat destruction and declines in catch rates, which made our commercial fishers struggle to make ends meet. Our government is committed to reversing this trend and implementing policies that prioritize the sustainability of the industry and the protection of our lakes.
Yeah, well.
The Honourable Member for St. James.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Manitoba Hydro is a crown jewel that benefits all Manitobans, but neglect and mismanagement by this PC government puts it all at risk. Both Hydro's 2040 strategy and their integrated management plan are not informed by overall provincial energy policy. This government did release an RFP almost 2 years ago, stating that an energy policy would be complete in March 2022, a year ago, but still we've seen nothing. My question for the Minister of Environment and Climate: how much money has this PC government spent on their non-existent provincial energy strategy, and when will we see it?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I will say the Manitoba Hydro is working diligently on their integrated resource management plan. We look forward to reviewing that in the near future. I will say as well, in terms of investments in Manitoba Hydro, we've allowed Manitoba Hydro to keep an extra $180 million this year alone, Madam Speaker. This will save Manitoba ratepayers money in rates, and it will also serve to strengthen the balance statement at Manitoba Hydro.
The Honourable Member for St. James on a supplementary question.
Thank you. That has zero relationship to what was just asked. We'll do it again. Madam Speaker, we've been raising questions for years about Hydro's rates and planning in the absence of an overarching energy strategy from this PC government. Documents we obtained in response to a FIPA request indicate that this minister's department has already given $1.2 million to Dunsky Energy to develop an energy policy framework. But those same documents state, quote, MEC does not currently have a provincial energy strategy, end quote. When will this minister reveal the PC energy strategy?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Well, interesting question coming from the opposition, Madam Speaker. We know they had 17 years to develop an energy strategy, never took one step towards achieving an energy strategy in Manitoba. In fact, what they did actually in their time in office through Manitoba Hydro, they actually went around the Public Utilities Board, ignored the Public Utilities Board on our way to the biggest boondoggle capital spend in Manitoba's history, $4 billion over budget. That's the NDP legacy.
The Honourable Member for St. James.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just like everything else with this government, there's no follow-through, announcements, but no action. Manitobans are rightfully concerned with this PC government's mismanagement of their oversight responsibilities with our crowns. They've privatized and sold off parts of hydro, and their failures at MPI with the ballooning costs of IT upgrades are putting our rates at risk. When will this minister release the provincial energy strategy, or will he keep it hidden like their privatization agenda until after the provincial election?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Well, Madam Speaker, let's talk about where Manitoba Hydro is today. $24 billion of debt, mostly at the hands of the opposition members when they were in government. Madam Speaker, we as a government are cleaning up the mess the NDP left behind. That is why we've taken measures this year alone to reduce ratepayers' fees by $180 million. That's something the NDP never did. $180 million savings to Manitoba ratepayers, and it will also lead to a better balance sheet for Manitoba Hydro. We're taking action on the mess the NDP left behind.
The Honourable Member for St. Boniface.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Manitoba's healthcare system is in crisis, and one reason is because this government deliberately held back funding for care. As I tabled, in 2019, it took 3 years for the PCs to sign a $400 million agreement for home care and mental health funding. At the same time, actual health funding was cut, frozen, and clawed back by up to $250 million a year, a 3.5% cut. The PC said the signing delay was to add dialysis to treatment, but Tom Wilson of Rowland is facing a $21,000 bill for transportation to get dialysis 53 kilometers away, and was told if he wanted care, he should move. Is this government going to help cover his costs for their cuts? What happened to care closer to home?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank the member from St. Boniface for the question. It gives me an opportunity to put some facts on the record, Madam Speaker. Our government is taking action, and I'd like to share some of the initiatives. 80 new physician training seats, including 10 international graduate seats, $129 million in incentives to attract and retain nurses, $141 million to triple the size of St. Boniface's ER. I know the member represents this hospital. $50 million to increase Health Sciences Centre surgical capacity by 25%, and so much more, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for St. Boniface on a supplementary question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Tom Wilson is only traveling 53 kilometers to Russell 3 times a week for dialysis. He's on a fixed income, and he got a bill for 1 year for $21,000, which has depleted much of his life savings. When this government talks about downloading costs, let's be very clear that they, by freezing municipal transfers for 7 years straight, downloaded these costs straight onto Mr. Wilson. These are PC budget documents which I tabled that show that transfers to Manitoba from 2015-16 to this year are up by 103%, from $3.5 to $73.3 billion. So the same budgets show that it didn't make it to health care. What is this government going to do to make sure that instead of being asked to move, Mr. Wilson can afford dialysis without going bankrupt? Will he be compensated for his loss?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I encourage all Manitobans who feel that they have had out-of-pocket expenses as a result of access in health care to send that information into Manitoba Health to have those receipts and their trip or their care adjudicated, and they will receive a response from Manitoba Health, Madam Speaker. It won't be adjudicated here on the chamber floor. It's in the department. But I want to state that our government is committed to providing care closer to home. Just this week, I was able to shake the hands and do a send-off to Dr. Manuso, who is offering retinal eye care in Dauphin to all those individuals in the Parkland region, saving them hours of travel time and out-of-pocket expenses, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for River Heights on a final supplementary.
Madam Speaker, school libraries are essential for learning. Yet the inequity present under NDP and PC governments in Manitoba has been nothing short of appalling. Today, only 3 school divisions in our province have both teacher librarians and library technicians. Teacher librarians play a critical role to develop literacy skills and help students find resources to learn the difference between real news and fake news. When literacy is a primary goal, why are school libraries in Manitoba so chronically underfunded and understaffed? Is the government more interested in propagating false news than in promoting the critical thinking to defend its spread?
The Honourable Minister of Education and Early Childhood Learning.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I appreciate the question coming from my friend from River Heights in regards to literacy and in regards to funding for the K-12 system, Madam Speaker. As I've said many times in this House, $100 million, a 6.1% increase this year alone to the K-12 education system, Madam Speaker. So the member from River Heights, he brings forward a very important question, and it almost sounds like the member from River Heights is wanting me to interfere with the democratic process in regards to the election of school boards, Madam Speaker. So we all know that school boards make those decisions within their school communities and within their individual schools to make sure that the priorities of their communities are covered on a day-to-day basis. Order! Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Order. I would indicate that it's not the member's turn. There is, I believe it might be the member for Dawson Trail.
Yes. Currently, First Nations across our province are declaring states of emergency over the significant increase in mental health-related crisis. Currently, 16 First Nations are experiencing a state of emergency. We know the Minister has been in contact with Indigenous leadership. Can she please share what important steps are being taken to address this emergency?
The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Reconciliation and Northern Relations.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member from Dawson Trail, and every day we wish him well on his journey as well. Our government's deeply concerned with the rise of mental health emergencies in the First Nations communities, especially the extensive reports that we've received the last few weeks. And that's why we are giving MKO as well as SCO more than $1 million each for a total of $2.1 million to increase the capacity of their mobile crisis units. These units are essential to provide emergency supports in a culturally sensitive way. I commend the work of these units, and I wish them well as they hire more staff and are able to do more work for their communities. But we will continue ensuring that people get the supports they need. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for St. Vital.
Madam Speaker, Manitobans know this PC government is no friend of post-secondary institutions. True. Since day one, they've cut their funding and they forced tuition to be hiked. And unfortunately, this trend continues with University College of the North. Funding for UCN in this year's budget is less than other institutions, and it's way below the rate of inflation. This government should start adequately funding UCN so that we can provide more opportunities for people in the North, not less. Can the minister explain why her government is leaving UCN behind?
The Honourable Minister of Advanced Education and Training.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Our government in this budget alone has increased funding to post-secondaries by 11.5%. We are proud to work with our partners within post-secondary and support the students as they seek their post-secondary education. The member opposite is again trying to fearmonger. I am in constant discussions with post-secondary stakeholders and their leadership, and we are working together to address the labor market needs and those needs of students as they seek further education.
Here, here. Well, here.
The honourable member for St. Vital on a supplementary question.
Madam Speaker, for many people in the North, UCN is their only option for higher education. That's why it plays such a vital role in northern Manitoba. They serve nearly 2,500 students at multiple locations across the entire North. Yet the PC's budget is failing UCN. It's well below inflation, and those cuts hurt the students in the North. That means that UCN will be forced to make cuts and means more difficulties, less opportunities for students to get ahead in the North. Will the minister simply explain why she's choosing to leave UCN behind?
The Honourable Minister of Advanced Education and Training.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and we appreciate and value all of the hard work that UCN does to support their students as well as to increase various programs for those who are looking to study in the North. In fact, our government has invested more than $4.3 million for 37 additional nurse training seats at UCN to help to add towards our 400 nursing seats. This is an area that the NDP ignored for 17 years.
That's
they
right.
knew of the nursing shortage that was about to come, and they ignored it. They didn't increase a single seat for nursing. We will do better because we know better. I fear for the future of Manitoba if they ever get near government again.
Order. The honourable member for St. Vital on a final supplementary.
Well, Madam Speaker, the government continues their pattern of ignoring people in the North.
That's right.
This PC government clearly makes it abundant for all Manitobans to see that UCN is not a priority for them.
Shameful.
UCN plays a critical role in the lives of students in northern Manitoba to give them opportunities to get ahead and grow their community and grow their economy. But when funding gets cut like this and it's well below inflation, it sets people behind and makes life more challenging for people in northern Manitoba. It's unclear why the PCs refuse to do the right thing and refuse to fund UCN properly. So will the minister clearly answer for all of us here today? Will she commit to fund UCN properly and stop leaving them behind?
The Honourable Minister of Advanced Education and Training.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I really am curious as to why members opposite continue to put fiction on the record. Manitobans can see for themselves that UCN did get an increase. All post-secondaries did get an increase in their funding, operating funding this year. So the member opposite claims that it's a cut. I would like him to table the documents to prove this. And when he realizes that that is factually correct, I want him to apologize to Manitobans for misleading them.
The time for oral questions has expired. Petitions. The Honourable Member for Transcona.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wish to present the following petition to the Legislative Assembly. The background to this petition is as follows. Number one, healthcare is a basic human right and a fundamental part of responsible public health. Many people in Manitoba are not covered by provincial healthcare. Migrant workers with work permits of less than 1 year, international students, and those undocumented residents who have lost their status for a variety of reasons. Number two, private health insurance is not a substitute for public health insurance. Private insurance plans available to most migrant workers and international students are paid for by the worker or student. They do not provide coverage for all of the potential health needs covered by public health coverage. Individuals are required to pay up front for health expenses without a guarantee that they will be covered and wait weeks for reimbursements. Number three, racialized people and communities are disproportionately affected by the pandemic, mainly due to the social and economic conditions which leave them vulnerable while performing essential work in a variety of industries in Manitoba. Number four, without adequate health care coverage, if they are ill, many of those without provincial health coverage will avoid seeking health care due to fear of being charged for the care, and some will fear possible detention and deportation if their immigration status is reported to the authorities. Number 5, according to the United Nations Human Rights Committee, denying essential health care to undocumented irregular migrants is a violation of their rights. Number 6, jurisdictions across Canada and the world have adopted access without fear policies to prevent sharing personal health information or immigration status with immigration authorities, and to give uninsured residents the confidence of access to health care. Number 7, the pandemic has clearly identified the need for everyone in Manitoba to have access to public health care to protect the health and safety of all who live in the province. We therefore petition the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba as follows. Number 1, to urge the provincial government to immediately provide comprehensive and free public health care coverage to all residents of Manitoba, regardless of immigration status, including refugee claimants, migrant workers, international students, dependent children of temporary residents, and undocumented citizens. Number 2, to urge the Minister of Health and Seniors Care to undertake a multilingual communication campaign to provide information on expanded coverage to all affected residents. Number 3, to urge the Minister of Health and Seniors Care to inform all healthcare institutions and providers of expanded coverage for those without public health insurance and the details on how necessary policy and protocol changes will be implemented. And number 4, to urge the Minister of Health and Seniors Care to create and enforce strict confidentiality policies and provide staff with training to protect the safety of residents with precarious immigration status and ensure that they access public health care without jeopardizing their ability to remain in Canada. Madam Speaker, this petition is signed by many Manitobans.
In accordance with our Rule 133, bracket 6, when petitions are read, they are deemed to be received by the House. The Honourable Member for the Pas-Camisec.
Madam Speaker, I wish to present the following petition to the Legislative Assembly. The background to this petition is as follows. Number 1, Provincial Road number 224 serves Peguis First Nation, Fisher River Cree Nation, and surrounding community. The road is in need of substantial repairs. Number 2, the road has been in poor condition for years and has numerous potholes, uneven driving surfaces, and extremely narrow shoulders. Number 3, due to recent population growth in the area, there has been increased vehicle and pedestrian use of Provincial Road 224. Without repair, Provincial Road 224 will continue to pose a hazard to the many Manitobans who use it on a regular basis. And number 5, concerned Manitobans are requesting that Provincial Road 224 be assessed and repaired urgently to improve safety for its users. We petition the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba as follows: to urge the Minister of Infrastructure to complete an assessment of Provincial Road 224 and implement the appropriate repairs using public funds as quickly as possible. Madam Speaker, this petition has been signed by many fine Manitobans.
The Honourable Member for Elmwood.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wish to present the following petition to the Legislative Assembly. The background to this petition is as follows. Number 1, Manitoba consumers believe products should last longer, be repaired when broken, and that planned obsolescence has environmental consequences that threatens a sustainable future. Number 2, in 2021, the European Union set minimum design standards for many electronic devices with new right to repair legislation. Number 3, the Biden administration in the U.S. has formally backed the right to repair movement in January 2022, following the European Union's lead. Number 4, right to repair enables consumers access to the resources needed to fix and modify their products, appliances, including cell phones, washing machines, and refrigerators. Number 5, right to repair also allows consumers and electronic repair businesses access to the most recent versions of repair manuals, replacement parts, software, and other tools that the manufacturer uses for diagnosing, maintaining, or repairing its branded electronic products. Number 6, right to repair further allows consumers to reset an electronic security function of its branded electronic products if the function is disabled during diagnosis, maintenance, or repair. Number 7, in addition, the right to repair ensures manufacturers replace electronic products at no cost or refund the amount paid by the consumer to purchase the electronic product where they refuse or they're unable to provide manuals or replacement costs. We petition the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba as follows: to urge the provincial government to adopt right to repair legislation requiring manufacturers of electronic devices and appliances, including washing machines and fridges and farm machinery, to make information, parts, and tools necessary for repair available to consumers and independent repair shops. This petition is signed by many Manitobans.
The honourable member for the Maples.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wish to present the following petition to the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba. The background to this petition is as follows. Number 1, home care workers in Manitoba provide skilled and compassionate care that helps better the quality of life for thousands of Manitobans. Number 2, robust home care services are proven to reduce the strain on healthcare services and demand for hospital beds. Number 3, home care reduces the demand for long-term care beds as it allows people to continue living in their own space. Number 4, studies show that a third of the 200,000 Canadians living in long-term care homes could stay home with the proper home care support. Number 5, investing in home care saves money as daily services cost half the price of long-term care beds and 1/7 the daily cost of hospital beds. Number 6, provincial government's cut to home care in Manitoba has resulted in chronic staffing issue that caused the WRHA to cancel 27,000 home care appointments in the month of April 2022 alone. Number 7, many clients in Manitoba only receive home care service once a day, where countries such as Denmark offer up to 6 visits a day. Number 8, home care workers in Manitoba are paid poor wages, are offered little benefit, lack sick time, and are overworked, resulting in difficult retaining and attracting workers. Number 9, home care workers have been without a contract since 2017 due to this provincial government's interference in labor negotiations. Number 10, investing in home care is a proactive approach that could save the province millions of dollars as well as allow more Manitobans to age in place. We petition the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba as follows: to urge the Minister of Health and Minister of Senior and Long-Term Care to immediately increase investment in home care service so that home care workers can be paid a fair wage and client can receive the level of service they require. This has been signed by many Manitobans. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Grievances. Orders of the day, the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the member for Springfield Shot. Could you please resolve the House into Committee of Supply?
It has been announced that the House will consider estimates this afternoon. The House will now resolve into Committee of Supply. Mr. Deputy Speaker, please take the chair.
Everyone's ready, yeah. Will the Committee of Supply please come to order? This section of the Committee of Supply will now resume consideration of the estimates of Executive Council. At this time, we invite ministerial and opposition staff to enter the chamber, and we ask the members to please introduce their staff in attendance. The Honourable First Minister.
Then Europe traveling right now. Oh, sorry. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have Catherine Gerard, who's the Clerk of the Executive Council. I have Brad Sallin, who's the Chief of Staff, as well as Braden Jones, who's our Director of Communications and a whole bunch of other things. Does a great job.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Mark Rosner, Esquire, joining us today.
All right. As previously stated, in accordance with Sub-Rule 78, Subsection 16, during the consideration of departmental estimates, questioning for each department shall proceed in a global manner. The floor is now open for questions. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you. Will the Premier call an inquiry into the police headquarters scandal?
The Honourable First Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It's my understanding that there was a settlement and an agreement with the City of Winnipeg that the City of Winnipeg accepted. And I know that the issue of a public inquiry went before City Council, and I believe there was no renew for a call of a public inquiry from the City of Winnipeg, so we respect where they're at on that. And of course, the Leader of the Opposition will know that this also remains before the courts, so that process will continue to unfold.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Does the Premier believe that an inquiry into the police headquarters scandal will ever be warranted?
The Honourable First Minister.
As I just indicated to the Leader of the Opposition, that this issue remains before the courts, and so we'll let those proceedings, those legal proceedings continue and to unfold. We won't be making any decision until that is concluded.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Has Cabinet ever discussed whether or not to call an inquiry into the police headquarters scandal?
The Honourable First Minister.
Again, what is discussed in Cabinet is confidential.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Do any Cabinet ministers or staff have to recuse themselves from discussions around calling an inquiry into the police headquarters scandal?
The Honourable First Minister.
Again, I would say that what happens in Cabinet is confidential, and but what I will say is that there are no conflicts with respect to any staff or ministers.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Has the Premier ever consulted the Conflict of Interest Commissioner on the matter of conflicts regarding the police headquarters scandal?
The Honourable First Minister.
There are no conflicts, so there would be no reason to engage with the Conflict of Interest Commissioner.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Who has made the determination that there are no conflicts of interest?
The Honourable First Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and the Leader of the Opposition will know that within any employment contracts that it's required for those individuals, those employees, to disclose any conflicts of interest that they have at that time, and the same goes for any cabinet ministers.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
So based on that assertion, who made the determination in this instance that there are no conflicts of interest?
Well, the Honourable First Minister.
The onus is on the individual to declare a conflict of interest. That's part of their employment contract. So the onus is on the individuals.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Did Scott Fielding, the former PC cabinet minister, have a conflict of interest on the police headquarters scandal?
The Honourable First Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the Leader of the Opposition will know that as an MLA, each MLA is required to file a conflict of interest form with the clerk's office. And if, so that's up to the individual to disclose those conflicts of interest. That goes over, and those are filed at the clerk's office. So I don't have Mr. Fielding's conflict of interest here, but I know that that is public knowledge, and the Leader of the Opposition has every right to go and get a copy of that if he'd like.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Was the Premier ever briefed on this matter when she served as the Minister of Justice for the province of Manitoba?
The Honourable First Minister.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And I believe I don't recall all the details with respect to briefings that took place, but there would have been a briefing, I believe, from my department on this issue at some point. As I recall, at the time, there was an RCMP, an ongoing RCMP investigation at the time, and I believe that RCMP investigation continued past my time as the Minister of Justice.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
So we now know that the RCMP recommended, and I quote, criminal charges relating to financial crimes with an estimated value of over $33 million, end quote. In May of 2018, was the Premier aware of this when she was Justice Minister?
The Honourable First Minister.
The Leader of the Opposition referred to something in May 2018. I don't recall the specifics of what he's referring to. I do know that the ongoing RCMP investigation went beyond my time as the Minister of Justice.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
We've previously tabled a briefing note in this House saying, and I quote, in May of 2018, and here the quote begins, or rather, the RCMP recommended, quote, criminal charges relating to financial crimes with an estimated value of over $33 million, end quote. So just to reiterate that recommendation, contained in the briefing note, May of 2018, the Premier was a Justice Minister until I believe August of that year. So can she explain?
The Honourable First Minister.
It's my understanding that the RCMP investigation continued beyond that, though, and was not concluded until after my time when I was in Justice.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
The substantive matter of the question is that there was a briefing note during the Premier's time as Minister of Justice saying that the RCMP recommended, quote, criminal charges relating to financial crimes with an estimated value of over $33 million, end quote. How did the Premier follow up on this information?
The Honourable First Minister.
Well, the Leader of the Opposition, I guess, has stated that the RCMP came out with charges in May of 2018, and after that process, I certainly don't get involved in that. That would have been up to the prosecution to decide from there whether or not, whether or not they decide to prosecute. Again, I was no longer Minister of Justice after August 1st of that year, I believe, and became the Minister of Families, and I believe that was an ongoing review that took place in the prosecution services, and that's up to them.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thanks. And we know now that a judge has ruled the former CAO of the City of Winnipeg accepted a $300,000 bribe as part of this police headquarters scandal. Does the Premier believe that there are no more outstanding questions regarding this matter?
The Honourable First Minister.
I believe there's an ongoing, this issue remains before the courts, and so be inappropriate to comment on that.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Can the Premier tell this committee if she thinks supervised consumption sites are part of a harm reduction strategy?
The Honourable First Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And our government continues to work with service delivery organizations as well as community partners to advance harm reduction programs and policies throughout the province of Manitoba. We are absolutely committed to a range of harm reduction strategies, and we are continuously evaluating these in order to respond to and implement the most cost-effective, safe, and evidence-formed strategies in the province of Manitoba. The Leader of the Opposition will know that we've invested over $2.2 million in annual funding and harm reduction initiatives right across the province. These include improving the safe distribution and disposal of needles and other harm reduction supplies, supporting a 24/7 safe space, and ensuring that Manitobans have access to life-saving medication in the event of drug toxicity, overdose through Manitoba's take-home naloxone program and a Narcan pilot program. The take-home naloxone program has more than 200 distribution sites right across Manitoba and provided over 17,000 free kits to Manitobans in 21-22, and more than doubling the 8,300 kits that was distributed in 2021. So again, we are taking significant action when it comes to harm reduction in the province of Manitoba. But I think it's also important to note that we also are taking a recovery approach. We want to ensure that we are getting, helping Manitobans get off of their addictions. And so that, of course, is the second part of this as well. We want to make sure harm reduction is there, which we are investing in a number of initiatives, and also focusing on recovery.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Why did the Premier make up the story about the non-existent California supervised consumption site?
The Honourable First Minister.
I already stated that I made a mistake there. And often, as politicians, we do make mistakes. And I had read something about California not moving forward with supervised consumption sites. I probably misread it. It does happen from time to time. Not all of us are perfect when it comes to these things. And so I, obviously stated that as well when asked by the media. But I know that there's other areas where these harm reduction, these supervised consumption sites are not necessarily the panacea. They are not the panacea, although for harm reduction. I know the Leader of the Opposition and members opposite think that they are. But I think there's also evidence out there that shows that they're not. And we want to look and do this based on evidence. That's why we're looking at placing our investments in other areas of harm reduction.
Before recognizing the Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition, I'm obliged to caution about the phrase "make up." It is very close to accusing the First Minister of lying, which is well established to be unparliamentary. So I issue that caution. Stop short of requesting withdrawal, but certainly a caution is necessary. But the Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
I made no speculation about the intent of the minister's statement there. And so happily we'll leave it on the record. We know that Manitoba's interprofessional maternal and perinatal team for leveraging empowerment and services is a group with expertise on not only the topic of harm reduction, but also the topic of addictions medicine. It's a group of dedicated healthcare professionals, doctors, nurses, PhDs, some cases medical doctors who also have PhDs. And they released a letter this week saying that they're opposed to Bill 33. They write, and I quote here, "We believe the Act, as it stands, will create additional barriers to organizations working with people who use substances and will negatively impact services provided. We are concerned with the lack of consultation with people who use substances, with their loved ones, and with those who work with, care for, and support this community. We respectfully request the Addiction Services Act be rescinded and a community consultation proceed." End quote. Does the Premier believe these frontline healthcare workers are mistaken in their opposition to Bill 33?
The Honourable First Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and certainly this is something that's near and dear to my heart, and I think it is for all of us, because we all know of either family members or friends, relatives, neighbors who have suffered with a loved one or themselves with addictions challenges, and the challenges and how that affects those families. And so my thoughts go out to all of those who are not just suffering from addictions problems, but to the families that are trying to help them. And I know certainly that what we want to do is focus on harm reduction as well as recovery, making sure that we're putting in place investments in areas to help Manitobans recover from their addictions. So again, focusing on getting Manitobans off of their addictions. And I believe that that's what Manitobans want us to do, is not to keep Manitobans on their addictions, but to focus on helping them during those difficult times, and also focusing on getting them the programs that they need to get off of addictions. I think it's unfortunate that the Leader of the Opposition and members of his party are very, very focused on one area, and that's supervised consumption sites as being the panacea of the addictions challenge that we face, not just in our province, but across the country and around the world. There is no panacea when it comes to addictions and getting Manitobans off their addictions. There is no one solution. Manitobans know that. The Leader of the Opposition and members opposite think that there is just one solution, and they seem to be fixated on supervised consumption sites. But the Leader of the Opposition also talked about Bill 33. And I want to be very clear about what Bill 33 is all about. It's about safety. And I am extremely concerned and disappointed that the NDP made a decision to block legislation that will actually keep our most vulnerable Manitobans safe. They have chosen effectively politics over the safety of vulnerable Manitobans, and I think that's their decision, and I think it's a wrong decision, but that's their decision. Because again, Bill 33 is all about safety, not barriers. The bill includes entirely reasonable measures to ensure that addiction services are provided in the safest possible manner to the most vulnerable people in our society. That's what Bill 33 is all about. So it's important, obviously, to ensure the linkages with the broader continuum of health and addictions care services, including healthcare workers themselves. Bill 33 is about safety for those dealing with mental health and addictions issues, safety for their families, safety for frontline workers, and safety for communities at large. And I think it's very unfortunate that the NDP has decided, again, to take an ideological approach to this. Bill 33 is about safety, and they have decided to block that. So they have decided to ensure that Manitobans with addictions problems will not have safe measures put in place to help protect them as they're going through, this very difficult time in their lives. So that's on the NDP. That's on the Leader of the Opposition deciding to not allow Bill 33 to go forward. It's about safety, and they have chosen not to allow for safety when it comes to those vulnerable people. I think that's wrong.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
I think we'll side with the medical doctors on this one and not the PC caucus. I think we'll side with the addictions medicine experts and not the Premier on this one. Again, I read from a letter signed by a number of experts on addictions medicine who did write the Premier on this, and we've yet to hear a single expert cited by the Premier or her government on Bill 33. Instead, we've heard an avalanche of concern from the experts on addictions medicine. And I think the thing that Manitobans should be concerned about in the Premier's comments just now is where she seeks to argue with and dispute the facts asserted by these experts in addictions medicine. Again, I'll reread a section of this open letter. It says, these experts are asserting the Act as it stands will create additional barriers. The Premier in her answer says it's not about barriers. So she's disputing the assertion of these experts. They go on to say that these experts in addictions medicine go on to say that it will negatively impact services provided. The Premier disputes that. So I would like the Premier to explain how it is that these experts in addictions medicine, these medical doctors, these infectious disease specialists, along with many others in other open letters sent to the Premier, why does she think that these frontline experts are mistaken when it comes to Bill 33?
The Honourable First Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I just think it's incredibly disappointing that the Leader of the Opposition and members opposite are fixated on just one area of being a panacea to a challenge that people are faced with in their addictions. Harm reduction is an important part of that, and we have invested millions of dollars in harm reduction initiatives. I've stated that. But the Leader of the Opposition and nobody on his bench ever talks about wanting to get people off and helping get Manitobans off of their addictions. And I think that that's really disturbing, actually. I would hope that everyone would want to help Manitobans, some of the most vulnerable Manitobans, get off of their addictions. That's a recovery model. They would want Manitobans to recover from their addiction challenges. But the Leader of the Opposition never wants to talk about that. They just want to talk about, supervised consumption sites, which is one part of this whole equation. And I can tell you that I think people who are suffering from addictions deserve better than that. We have a plan to help get them off of their addictions, while helping them in the interim as well in harm reduction. But the Leader of the Opposition likes to, talk about some doctors that agree with, his area and what the NDP and support their narrative. Okay, that apparently, supervised consumption sites are a panacea to dealing with people with addictions. I can tell you that the plan that we have put in place is supported by some of the top doctors in Manitoba. Our Chief Public Health Officer and our Chief Provincial Psychiatrists are two of those individuals, the highest ranking doctors in our province when it comes to addictions. And I can tell you that I will take the advice of those doctors over the NDP any day.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
I would just say the following. Everyone in Manitoba knows that the addictions crisis is worse than it's ever been, and it's happened under the PC's watch. Their approach has been an utter failure when it comes to addictions. And so we have the addictions medicine experts and the physicians on our side. We have the frontline workers and community organizations on our side. And so we stopped Bill 33 and just took another important step in dismantling the PC's failure of an approach to respond with compassion and to listen to the evidence when it comes to addictions. Of course, their approach is just like Brian Pallister's approach. Yeah. So hopefully, we will be able to turn the page on this dark portion where the addictions response in Manitoba ignored the evidence and just focused on what Brian Pallister thought was best, right? Because Manitobans want better. They spoke loudly and clearly, and the PCs know that, which is why they will never say Brian Pallister's name again, even though he is the reason that almost all of them were elected. But we'll change that. There will be far fewer PC MLAs in the near future.
Hear, hear.
Anyway, on said topic of Brian Pallister and his failing plans for healthcare, I do use the present tense because while Brian Pallister may no longer be an MLA or around the cabinet, his failing plan for healthcare continues to be alive and well.
His blueprint.
So on the subject of rural healthcare, I'd like to know if the Premier can confirm whether she still supports and is actively implementing the clinical and preventive services plan first developed by Brian Pallister.
The Honourable First Minister.
Well, again, I'm extremely disappointed in the Leader of the Opposition, who has no plan to get people off of their addictions. He is fixated on one small component of this, supervised consumption sites, as being the panacea to everyone who has addictions. I can tell you that is not a plan, Mr. Chair. He's just admitted that he does not have a plan to get people off of their addictions. We have a plan that includes harm reduction, a plan that includes recovery, to make sure that Manitobans have the tools they need to recover from their addictions. And that's the difference, I guess, between us and them, is that we believe in those Manitobans. We want to make sure that those Manitobans have hope for the future, that they are going to be given the recovery that they need. We'll offer them the tools that they need to recover from their addictions. While the NDP wants to keep them on their addictions because they have no plan to get them off, we are going to focus on helping them during this time, but also helping them to recover. And I know that you know, the Leader of the Opposition is fixated with Brian Pallister. You know, that's his issue. You know, he wants to continue to mention that, and that's his issue. But certainly, you know, we stand side by side. Two of our top doctors in the province of Manitoba who support our plan. The Chief Public Health Officer and the Chief Provincial Psychiatrist. Two individuals, top doctors in these areas to help people with their mental health and addictions. And I know, This is hard for the Leader of the Opposition, I'm sure, as he's, saying some things and heckling from his seat. But to me, this issue is too important. It's too important to Manitobans who are suffering from addictions themselves, but to their families. Their families are crying out for help, and we are there to help them with a plan to help them get off their addictions, a recovery plan. Again, the Leader of the Opposition has no plan. His only plan is about supervised consumption sites to keep people on their addictions. He has no plan to get them off. We believe that Manitobans suffering from addictions deserve more than that. They deserve better than that, Mr. Chair.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you. The Clinical and Preventative Services Plan first developed under Brian Pallister and that the Premier is now implementing. Does she support this plan?
The Honourable First Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and the Leader of the Opposition should know that the Clinical Preventative Services Plan is all about offering health care closer to home. And so many of the investments that we're making, and I know that I was out in Brandon last week for the Manitoba Winter Fair, where we announced $135 million for the hospital in Brandon that will act as a hub for the entire Westman and Parkland region. And that offers the investments that are going in there also include investments into cancer care, which will offer those services for cancer patients in the region, so that those cancer patients no longer have to come to Winnipeg to get their cancer treatments. They can go to Brandon, closer to home. And so that, of course, is what this is all about, and that's why we're making these investments, in the Brandon hospital. We are also, and again, the Leader of the Opposition is opposed to that. Certainly, they all voted against that because it's in the budget, and they voted against that. I think that that's unfortunate. We'll make sure that the people in Westman and the Parkland region are aware of the fact that the Leader of the Opposition will reverse those decisions. They'll no longer make the investments in the Brandon Hospital so that those individuals can get health care closer to home. Those cancer patients can get, those treatments closer to home. I think it's unfortunate that the Leader of the Opposition is opposed to that. I guess what he's also opposed to is $185.5 million for a new hospital in Nipawa. Again, offering those services closer to home for people in those communities so that they don't have to travel the longer distances to Winnipeg to get the care that they need. They can go to Nipawa, to the hospital, once that is going. But again, all of the members opposite voted against that. They voted against these initiatives. So we'll be sure to let the individuals who are living out in those communities know that the Leader of the Opposition will no longer build that hospital. He was against that. He doesn't like that. And so we'll be sure to know, let those individuals know that the Leader of the Opposition is opposed to that. I guess they're also opposed because they voted against it. $5.1 million for new endoscopy, chemotherapy spaces at the Dauphin Regional Health Centre. Again, those services provided to those individuals in Dauphin. We'll be sure to let the people of Dauphin know and the people in the surrounding communities know that the Leader of the Opposition is opposed to allowing Dauphin to offer those endoscopy and chemotherapy, right there in Dauphin for those. That's better health care closer to home, Mr. Chair. So again, we will let Manitobans know that the Leader of the Opposition and all of the members opposite that they are opposed to these things. They had an opportunity to vote in favor of these good initiatives that offer health care closer to home for people outside of Winnipeg, but the Leader of the Opposition and all of the members opposite voted against it. We think that's wrong. We think this is good for people in the Westman and Parkland regions. We think that that's a positive thing for people in those communities, that they would be able to have that access to health care closer to home. We think that's a positive thing. I think it's unfortunate that members opposite disagree with that.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
I just want to thank the Premier for confirming that she is continuing to implement the Clinical and Preventive Services Plan, which was first developed under Brian Pallister and released publicly in 2019. Manitobans have always suspected and known that the Premier is implementing Brian Pallister's plan for healthcare, but it's good to have clarity after her comments in the Estimates Committee today. Now that that is on the record in her own verbiage, I'd like to table a document related to the Brian Pallister plan on healthcare. This is one that's been shared publicly, and I'm sharing it with the committee today so that we can ascertain greater detail about the exact contours of how the Premier intends to implement Brian Pallister's plan to cut healthcare across rural Manitoba under the guise of the moniker Clinical and Preventive Services Plan. So the document that I just tabled includes a long list of closures of emergency departments, and not confined to one health region either, I would add. There are closures here in Prairie Mountain, in Shared Health Santé Sud. There are closures put on the agenda here in Interlake Eastern RHA. Some of the communities that are being contemplated are places like Melita, Glenborough, Carberry, Treeherne. I would point out that many of these communities have dealt with closures this year or in years past. So I'd just like the Premier to tell us, with specific reference to the emergency departments listed here, is this still the plan? Does she intend to close these emergency departments? And if not all of them, which ones will she close?
The Honourable First Minister.
Well, again, Mr. Chair, it's disappointing that the Leader of the Opposition is going down this path, fear-mongering for Manitobans. I think it's important that we remind Manitobans what we inherited from the previous NDP government. Not only did they run in an election, Mr. Chair, in 1999, to end hallway medicine in 6 months with $15 million. But 15 years later, under Greg Selinger, the Leader of the Opposition's previous leader and mentor, you know, under Greg Selinger in 2015, 15 years after they said, just for $15 million, we're going to end hallway medicine, we're going to fix healthcare. That's another thing the Leader of the Opposition's also. He's claimed that he's going to fix healthcare. Well, I do recall back in 1999, part of their platform back then was to fix healthcare. And did they do it? Did they fix healthcare? No, they certainly didn't fix healthcare. 15 years under their watch after that, the Grace Hospital was among the longest wait times in their ER in the country. So let's talk about trust when it comes to the Leader of the Opposition and the NDP, who ran an election on ending hallway medicine and on fixing healthcare, and in fact, they made it worse. So Manitobans know that. They know that they don't want to go back to those dark days. And of course, when we took over office, we had to act to make sure that we moved in a direction to ensure that we cleaned up the mess of the previous NDP government, who for 17 years didn't make our healthcare system better. In fact, they made it worse. And so those are the facts, Mr. Chair. It's unfortunate, but those are the facts. And I think what's also the facts, again, I will go back to healthcare closer to home, which the Leader of the Opposition and members opposite don't seem to want for Manitobans. They don't want Manitobans to have better healthcare closer to home. So I will remind the Leader of the Opposition once again and all the members opposite of what they actually voted against. They voted against more health care closer to home. Oh, in Selkirk, the Selkirk Regional Health Centre, $45.7 million expansion to the Selkirk Regional Health Centre. Again, we will make sure that all of the people in the Selkirk and surrounding communities know that the Leader of the Opposition and all of the members opposite voted against and are not in favor of this investment in the Selkirk Regional Health Centre that will offer better health care closer to home for people in that region. Mr. Chair, I think it's unfortunate because those Manitobans deserve to have that health care closer to home, and we as a government are going to make sure that they get it.
Before recognizing the Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition, I have to draw attention to one particular member whose exuberant commentary seems to sometimes be a little louder than it should. So I would just caution that particular individual. I'm sure they know who they are, and encourage them to listen and participate in ways that are not over the top, but appropriate to the room that we are in. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
I'm looking at my colleague from Springfield, and I don't know that he understood the message as genteel and polite as the phraseology was. His expression betrays one in confusion. Anyways, the Premier's previous commentary is directly contradictory of the facts of her time in office, as well as that of Brian Pallister. And in particular, the document that we just tabled was created by this government under their Brian Pallister Clinical and Preventive Services Plan, and it lists a number of emergency departments that they were scheduling to close. So the question for the Premier again is this still a list of closures for emergency departments in rural Manitoba? And is this still the plan that this government is implementing?
The Honourable First Minister.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And what the Leader of the Opposition seems to forget is that we have just recently gone through a worldwide pandemic. Okay? The Leader of the Opposition has conveniently left that out of his narrative in all of this, Mr. Chair. And I think that's unfortunate because those were very, very difficult times, not just for Manitobans, but for people right across this country and around the world, some of the challenging times that people had to face. And for the Leader of the Opposition to just disregard those years, those COVID years, I think is very unfortunate, because certainly during that time in our healthcare system, we learned a lot during that time. So of course, as a result of the things that we have learned during the pandemic, we will be making improvements, further improvements to our healthcare system. And so our healthcare system is ever evolving. Changes will take place, and we learn from different things, and particularly during the pandemic. So there will be changes, there's no question. It's an evolving situation when it comes to our healthcare system. We will continue to listen to Manitobans, to work closely with Manitobans and to the experts, and listen to them as to how we can make improvements within our healthcare system. So that's what our plan is. I don't believe the NDP has a plan at all, actually, because certainly they haven't come forward with anything. But I think Manitobans, it's important, Mr. Chair, that once again we remind Manitobans of the dark days of the NDP government and what Manitobans, I don't think, want to go back to. And the days when under Greg Selinger, the leader of the opposition's mentor, in 2015 and 16, Winnipeg had according to the CIHI report, Winnipeg has the longest ER wait times in the country, not just for the Grace Hospital, but also for the Concordia Hospital. Now, I know members opposite like to ask questions about the Concordia Hospital, but you go back to the dark days of the NDP government, where in fact, that hospital had the longest ER wait times in the country. Now, that was under an NDP government, not under a progressive conservative government. But let's also look at the CIHI report on wait times for priority procedures in Canada. Again, in 2015, under the previous Premier, Greg Selinger, of course, the mentor to the current leader of the opposition, Manitoba was the worst province west of the Maritimes for cataract surgeries. Now, we have depleted the wait list, the pre-pandemic wait list for cataracts in Manitoba. We are making significant progress in those areas. What Manitobans don't want to do is go back to those dark days of the NDP government, where we are the worst, where we were the worst in the country. That's nothing to be proud of as a Manitoban. We don't want to go back to those dark days of the NDP, Mr. Chair. And I will go on. I know the leader of the opposition has more questions, so we'll let him ask more of those questions. But I think it's very important that Manitobans are aware of what the NDP did to our healthcare system when they were in government, because Manitobans, believe me, do not want to go back to those dark days.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
I think Manitobans, both rural and urban alike, are concerned when they see a Premier refusing to address questions about her government's own plan to close rural emergency departments. I mean, the dodge and deflection seems to be revealing. Like, if this is not the plan, why not just say we're not going to close those emergency departments? The fact that the Premier can't say that's very telling. So let's turn to the EMS stations on this list. Again, there's a long list of EMS stations in a variety of health regions. Interlake Eastern, Prairie Mountain, Southern Health, Santé Sud, and these are in communities right across southern Manitoba, the Parkland, Westman, as you would expect. So I would like to ask the Premier, is her government still planning to close these EMS stations as part of their clinical and preventive services plan?
The Honourable First Minister.
Well, Mr. Chair, I think it's important to note that, again, going back to the dark days of the previous NDP government, again under Greg Selinger, the Leader of the Opposition's mentor, where more than 16 emergency departments across rural Manitoba were closed. That was under the NDP's watch. We have no plans to close rural ERs, Mr. Chair. But I think it's very important that Manitobans know what happened under those dark days of the Leader of the Opposition's mentor, Greg Selinger. Let's talk about the ERs that they closed and see what that means to the people in Emerson, where they closed that facility, that ER. They closed the ER in Manitou. They closed the ER in McGregor. They closed the ER in St. Claude and in Gladstone and in Vida. They also closed the ERs and that was in Southern Health, in Prairie Mountain. They closed the ERs in Erickson, in Rossburn, in Wawanesa, in Birtle. Oh, just wait for it. The list goes on and on. In Birtle, in Rivers, and in Balder, and in McCreary, and in Winnipegosis. And in the Interlake Eastern Regional Health Authority, they closed the ERs in Whitemouth and in Toulon. So again, we have not closed rural ERs. The Leader of the Opposition, as part of a party where his mentor, Greg Selinger, who was the Premier of the province at the time, went through and closed all of those. And there was more too, as well, Mr. Chair. The fact of the matter is, it's their track record on closing ERs in rural and surrounding communities in Prairie Mountain and Southern Health and Interlake Eastern, Mr. Chair. That's their record, and they have to live with that. And Manitobans don't forget that. But in case they do, Mr. Chair, I'm just reminding them today, because we think it's important for the people in all of these communities that they know that that's what the NDP did before, because that's exactly what their plan is in the future.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
There have been a number of closures of healthcare facilities under the Premier's time in office. Altona, Glenborough, Melita, as well as looming closures in Carberry and Ericsdale. Can the Premier tell the committee why so many rural emergency departments and EMS stations are closing in this province under her watch?
The Honourable First Minister.
Well, I think it's important also to remind Manitobans, Mr. Chair, that those closures, the ER closures under the NDP government, took place not after a worldwide pandemic. And in fact, during those years, they were getting record increases in healthcare transfers from the federal government. And yet they were still closing rural ERs at that time. Again, that is their track record. That is not our track record. That is the record of Greg Selinger, who was the Premier at the time, again, the Leader of the Opposition's mentor, who shut down all of these rural ERs. Again, not after a worldwide pandemic where we have significant health human resource challenges. Again, those health human resource challenges are not just challenges here in Manitoba, they're right across the country. And certainly the pandemic made that much more challenging for all of the provinces right across this country and the territories. And of course, we are addressing those issues. That's why we have invested more than $200 million to attract more than 2,000 healthcare workers, the province of Manitoba, and we're well on our way to achieving that, Mr. Chair. But it's important to remember that we are taking action in these areas. We know, and we did just come out of a worldwide pandemic. So these are challenges that we have been facing, but we've been facing them head on to ensure that we're bringing, we're recruiting new people, 2,000 more healthcare professionals to the province of Manitoba. We're retaining, putting in place a retention strategy as well as a training strategy to ensure that we have more healthcare professionals working in their areas of profession. And so I think it's, again, very important that we remind those Manitobans of why we don't want to go back to those dark days of the NDP government, because that is indicative of what they can look forward to if the NDP ever got back into government.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Manitobans know well that the problems in healthcare were caused by Brian Pallister and this Premier. They don't need to be reminded of it because they've seen that every day for the past number of years. And we know that this is part of the reason why Brian Pallister was chased out of the building. But certainly we haven't seen any improvements under this Premier. In fact, more people are leaving the bedside. More people are leaving the healthcare system today. And if you were to do an exit interview and ask those folks who are leaving the healthcare system, are you leaving as a result of issues arising from the pandemic? They would say no, we are leaving because we're frustrated with the PC government's mismanagement of healthcare. That's right. So, where the PCs have invested in bureaucracy and closed frontline services and cut those working at the bedside, we would restore investments in local communities to ensure that Manitobans can get the health care that they need. It's often said by many observers who have been deeply frustrated with the Stephenson government and Brian Pallister's failures on health care, it's often said that what they've done to health care, they're going to do to the education system next. Of course, we heard this loud and clear all summer long after the Premier co-signed and seconded Bill 64. But those concerns definitely continued on well past Bill 64 and our successful campaign against it. There are many concerns about this government's future plans with respect to education funding. We know that this government ordered a review of education funding and commissioned the creation of a new education funding model. However, as part of the Operation Desperation on the other side of the House, the PCs delayed the release of this new education funding model until after the election. Of course, I think every Manitoban knows what version of the PCs you're going to get after the election, should they be given a chance to pursue Bill 64-like policies. Again, it's going to be more of the negative impacts on schools in Manitoba. Manitobans are wondering what's up with this education funding model and what in it is so bad that they're not allowed to see prior to this year's election. So the Premier just tell Manitobans about this education funding model. What in it is so bad that she had to stop its release prior to this year's election?
The Honourable First Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I certainly appreciate the question from the Leader of the Opposition when it comes to the funding of our education system, our K-12. I think it gives me an opportunity to remind Manitobans once again of the significant investments that we have made in our K-12 education system. In fact, a 6.1% increase in education, over $100 million more just this year to our education system. That's more funding to educate our kids. We want to make sure that we get the best education that we can for our kids. And what does that mean? Not one single school division, every single school division in the province of Manitoba received a significant increase to their education funding. And of course, I think it's important at this point in time to remind Manitobans that every single one of the NDP across the way voted against those investments in education in our province. Can you imagine that in beautiful Plains School Division, a 12.4% increase, Mr. Chair. That's a significant increase to that school division for the people and the children that go to school within that school division. That's a significant increase for those children. And what did the Leader of the Opposition do? He voted against that. Why would he do that, Mr. Chair? I think that that's just unfortunate. And then, of course, we go down to Borderland School Division, and they received a 4.2% increase, significant increase for the children in those communities, making sure that they get better health care in their, better education in their communities. And again, I think it's important that we remind Manitobans that each and every one of the NDP voted against those investments, the increases of investments for those students in the Borderland School Division. I think that that's very unfortunate, but we will remind the people in those communities about the fact that the Leader of the Opposition voted against the increase in funding for education in that area. And we go to the Brandon School Division. Brandon School Division got a 10.2% increase to their education budget. Again, more money for the kids' education in Brandon. And I can't even believe even Brandon, the Leader of the Opposition, voted against that, and we'll make sure that all of the people in Brandon are aware of the fact that the Leader of the Opposition and all of his MLAs voted against that increase for the children in the Brandon community. And Mr. Chair, I think in general I could go on here, and I probably will, because I think it's very important that Manitobans know and understand that we are making significant investments into funding education in our province, and that the Leader of the Opposition and each and every one of the NDP, MLAs, and the Liberals voted against that. So in Evergreen School Division, they got a 6.4% increase to education funding in that school division. And once again, the Leader of the Opposition and all of the members opposite voted against that. So we will take no lessons from the members opposite when it comes to funding education in the province of Manitoba. Because on one hand, they say, well, you should be funding education more, and then we do, and what do, Mr. Chair? They turn around and vote against that. That is just not right. There's something just wrong about that, Mr. Chair.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Yeah. Okay, why did the Premier break the promise to release a new education funding model before this year's election?
The Honourable First Minister.
Well, the Leader of the Opposition will know that the NDP, when they were in government, had 17 years to fix the funding model in the province for education, the K-12 education in the province of Manitoba, and they did nothing. So there hasn't been a comprehensive review in well over 20 years. You know, they had an opportunity to do that when they were in power in their latter years, and they chose not to. So we have, and we are still committed to a funding model review, but it's very important that after, you know, decades of nothing happening, that we take the time to get it right. And so we are taking the time right now to ensure that we consult with stakeholders within the education field to make sure that we get it right. And we think that that's the prudent thing to do. We wouldn't want to rush forward on that and make sure that we get it right. So that is, of course, what we were doing. But I think the most important thing is that we are, in the interim, making sure we're making those investments in our K-12 education system. And again, the Leader of the Opposition and other members across the way have said that they have wanted to see an increase in the funding of education, and we delivered on that. We have delivered on that. But now that we've done that, they seem to want to vote against that. They voted against every single increase to all of the school divisions across the province of Manitoba. So, you know, we're going to remind the people of Flin Flon. The people of Flin Flon School Division got a 3.7% increase to their budget. And we will remind the people of Flin Flon that the Leader of the Opposition and all the members opposite voted against that increase for the Flin Flon School Division. I wonder what the children in Flin Flon would feel about that, or the parents would feel about that, where the Leader of the Opposition and everyone opposite voted against an increase for that school division. And we look at the Interlake. The Interlake got a 4.3% increase in their school division. Again, that is more money, not less money. So the Leader of the Opposition and members opposite want to continue to fearmonger and put misinformation on the record. I would say that that is, it's just simply not true. And so they have their narrative, though, and their reason why they want to put false information on the record, because what is true, and these are the facts, Mr. Chair, that in the Interlake they got a 4.3% increase to their education funding. And we look at Park West, Mr. Chair. Park West got a 10.4% increase in their education funding. And again, this is all part of a formula out there, which of course we are reviewing that right now and making sure we want to come up with a fair and equitable funding model that we take the time to get it right, when it's been decades of the previous NDP government doing nothing about that at all, not bothering to do that. They didn't care about the education of children back there, or certainly they didn't care enough to look at the funding model and want to make some changes to that. And now I know the Leader of the Opposition, this is maybe hard for him, he doesn't like this, but these are the facts. And I think it's important that we put the facts on the record. So when it comes to Seine River School Division, a 5.5% increase in the funding in Seine River. And of course, that is more funding for that school division, not less funding. And well, it's important that the Leader of the Opposition and all Manitobans know that every single school division in the province of Manitoba got a significant increase in their funding. And it's important to just remind Manitobans once again that the Leader of the Opposition and all of the MLAs, all of the NDP MLAs voted against that. Shame on them.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Yeah, we've spoken and visited with many of the school divisions that the Premier name checks, thereby fulfilling a important public service that she and her caucus have refused to carry out. And what they told us in the Interlake is for the course with what many of the divisions have said, which is that they're going to be forced to cut teaching positions in the region. And so for the Interlake School Division, when we were there, as a result of the, policy choices that the Premier is trying to gloat about here, they're going to have to cut 2 teaching jobs. And so the school trustees in that region are forced to contend with the decision of, should we cut a position from Fisher Branch, or should we cut a position from Ashern, or should we cut a position from a high school, or should it be an early years school? This is the impact of the PC's failures on education for the entirety of their time in office. And that's an area where there's supposed to be a PC MLA. Not once did he meet with this board. Not once has he raised this issue here in the legislature. That's what's happening in the real world outside the PC bubble. It's not good. This is a part of the province where young people could use a lot of help on their path to reaching their full potential. And that's not happening. Questions were about the education funding model over which this Premier broke her promise to release this year. This is one of the first commitments that she made as Premier. It's a press release outlining the timeline that the government committed to. This press release was released on November 18th, 2021. And all the consultations and processes that the Premier alludes to as the pretext for breaking her word on this issue, in that press release were outlined as supposed to have been concluded in 2022, and with the entire project to be completed by February of 2023, and this new education funding model to be in place by 2023-2024 school year. Now, the Premier, in her response previous to this one, says that the reason why she broke her word is because she's so busy talking to these school divisions. I can tell you for a fact that the Interlake School Division, of which I was just referring to, has heard nothing about this new education funding model from this provincial government. That statement is equally applicable across any number of school divisions that we've spoken to. It suggests that the pretext for which the Premier broke her word on this topic is false, or at least the proffered excuse that she gives in this committee today, that it is false. More likely, there's some sort of political reason. Most likely, it's the education funding model will mean further cuts and negative impacts on education in Manitoba. And as part of their election year Operation Desperation, the PCs didn't want to release that prior to voting day. Seems like the most logical scenario to me. But yeah, I don't expect that the Premier is going to answer these questions substantively. I imagine that there's going to be a continued proffering of these talking points, even though we're talking about an issue of schools in Manitoba that are underfunded under this government and the impacts on children. C'est la vie avec les PCs. That's life with a PC government. So, rather than adequately fund education in Manitoba, we know that admin and bureaucratic costs have risen in the Premier's department. The costs for the Executive Council increased by 6.8% this year. You'll note that that percentage increase is higher than that offered to kids in schools. So why did the budget for the Executive Council increase by 6.8% this year?
The Honourable First Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And the Leader of the Opposition just talked about and questioning the adequacy of funding for the K-12 schools. And, we have a 6.1% increase average funding to the K-12 schools, the school divisions. Let's look back under Greg Selinger, again, back in 2016. Greg Selinger, of course, Mr. Chair, is the Leader of the Opposition's mentor. And if he's talking and saying and questioning the 6.1% increase that we just passed and that he voted against, if he says that that's not adequate, I wonder if he could comment on the 2.5% increase that was under Greg Selinger, again, his mentor back in 2016. Because surely if 6.1 is not adequate, then what does he say about his own NDP, paltry 2.5% increase back in 2016? So maybe the Leader of the Opposition will maybe comment on that. I'm not sure, but certainly that is the record of the NDP. We're making significant investments in education in the province of Manitoba. Again, the Leader of the Opposition and every member opposite voted against those increases for those school divisions. And I just want to point out to the Winnipeg School Division, of course, that is where the Leader of the Opposition's constituency is. There's a 6% increase to the Winnipeg 1 School Division in the province of Manitoba, and I wonder what does he say to his constituents, all of the children in his constituency? What does he say to them when he lets them know that he voted against a 6% increase to the school division, which could cover off all sorts of activities for the kids' education within that school division? I wonder what he's going to say to his constituents. I wonder what he says to the constituents where some of his representatives reside in the St. James Assiniboia School Division, where they received an 8.1% increase to their school division. I wonder what they are saying to their constituents and to the families and to the children in those constituencies. What do they say to those individuals? Because I don't think that they would be very happy to know that those MLAs the NDP MLAs voted against that. And so I wonder if the Leader of the Opposition would care to comment on that. If he thinks that a 6.1%, if he's questioning the adequacy of a 6.1% increase, historic increase in the province of Manitoba to K-12 funding, if he's questioning the adequacy of that, then what does he say about Greg Selinger's paltry 2.5% increase in 2016? Wonder what the Leader of the Opposition will be telling his constituents about that. I don't know.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
I'm going to tell the constituents right across Manitoba that we stopped Bill 64 and Brian Pallister's terrible plan for education.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Oh, she stopped it.
The Premier's heckling. She's saying, hey, don't forget my role in Bill 64. I seconded that terrible piece of legislation. So you're right. I'll amend my comment. We stopped Brian Pallister and the Premier of Manitoba's terrible Bill 64, thereby giving local voices a chance to be heard when it comes to your school's education.
That's right.
The Premier's, Operation Desperation, 2023 rebrand attempt falls flat when her own department, the Executive Council, gets a bigger percentage increase than anyone else, than the funding for school kids. You know, call me a wild man, but I think if you got an extra dollar in government, you should invest it in children and their education. We just haven't seen that from the PCs. Not until, you know, Operation Desperation was launched this year. And I think that, you know, obviously I'm poking fun at the PC's personal approaches to these issues, but the substantive issue is very clear. Children in Manitoba need investments to be able to reach their full potential. And the PCs, rather than making these investments, have chose to cut huge checks to billionaires who don't even live in Manitoba. The owners of Polo Park Mall, one of the Koch brothers, Galen Weston. These are all facts. They've all received massive checks. And you know what you could do for the same amount of money? You could pay for a province-wide nutrition program that would be accessible in every school division in Manitoba.
Sounds reasonable.
So you're going to have a clear choice this year, Mr. Chair. You can choose the PCs with more checks for billionaires, or you can have the NDP who will help feed hungry kids in Manitoba.
Not like James Teitzman.
The choice is yours, and I think the choice is clear.
Committee rise, call in speaker. The hour being 5 p.m., this House is adjourned and stands adjourned until tomorrow morning at 10 a.m.